Ukraine is doing the unthinkable. It's striking inside Russia, and there's nothing Putin can do to stop it. That's because it's not a one big push to just destroy the Russian regime. Rather, it's droves and droves of smaller attacks that are just chipping away at the Russian economy and the Russian psyche. It's death by 1,000 cuts. Things have gotten so bad for the Russian economy that Putin is begging Kim Jong-un again. This time, not just for soldiers, but workers, so he can keep the Russian economy going. On top of this, Kremlin is adding more than 100,000 troops to its army because the casualties on the front line for Russia just keep on piling. So in today's video, let's go over exactly how Ukraine has continued to bring the war inside Russia, how Russia is coping with this, and why Putin is begging Kim Jong-un again. Let's start with recent attacks inside Russia because I know you guys love them.
In November, the Ukrainian military confirmed 4 strikes into Russia, with these 2 both involving oil infrastructure. The following month, oil depots and production plants are hit again in 4 locations, including this one the Ukrainians say is used to provide fuel for the Russian military. A 5th strike is against military infrastructure. By January, the strikes are even more intense, with 13 confirmed in total against oil targets, including 3 sites that are each hit twice. A 14th strike is against a microelectronics plant. Among the locations attacked twice is the Kristall oil depot, close to an airbase where Russia's strategic bombers are located. Satellite imagery shows the site before the attacks and after, where a fire is said to have burnt for 5 days. The Ryazan refinery is where another double strike took place. One of the 4 largest refineries in Russia, it was hit on the 24th of January and again the following day. As well as increasing in tempo, the drone strikes also show Ukraine's growing reach, such as these attacks on the 29th of January against an oil refinery and a pumping station that are 500 miles and 300 miles respectively from the Ukrainian border.
Now, this is only picked up in February, and we'll get to the February clips in just a second. But as we have covered before, the reason Ukraine is doing this is multifold. First of all, attacking refineries and oil depots that are supplying the front lines, that has a direct effect, a direct benefit to the Ukrainian troops on the front line. Because if the jets don't have fuel, they cannot fly. If the tanks don't have fuel, they cannot drive. If the donkeys don't have fuel, I guess that's why they brought the donkeys. But the other benefit is, of course, the economy. The Russian economy is dependent on oil, and if Ukraine can keep out one of the refineries that's producing even 1-2% of the total oil that Russia produces, that's a big hit, and that's what they've been taking advantage of, the good old double tap, where they hit a refinery, they wait a few days, if the fire is put out, they hit it again because Russians are not prepared for the same place to get hit twice. Now let's look at some of the February clips. This happened just a few days ago. First, we have the Saratov facility. It refines around 7 million tons of Russian oil a year. That's more than 2% of the Russian refinery capacity annually. And Ukraine just hit it, and here's the clip. Now, I already know someone's gonna comment down below saying, hey, refineries can be repaired. You know, it's not that big a deal. Of course, no one's saying these cannot be repaired. All I'm saying is it's very hard to repair a refinery that just keeps getting hit. The good old double tap. Here's another clip from the same refinery, just from a different angle. Now next up, we have another 2 key refineries, this time in Krasnodar region of Russia. But before we get to that, I do want to mention that some of the clips that I'm showing, they just have fire, so it's perfectly fine to show it on YouTube. But if clips have blood or anything more than that, I cannot show it on YouTube because YouTube has a habit of restricting our videos. And that's why we have Patreon. Over there, we post daily clips about everything that's going on in the war. And if that's something you guys are interested in watching, you can support us on Patreon for as little as $5 by clicking the link down below or scanning the QR code on your screen. You can follow along on the war, you can support the channel, and on top of that, we get experts to break down frontline clips, so it's very educational to hear that. And that's something we do want to post on YouTube, but it's just very hard to show frontline action on YouTube, so that's why we posted it on our Patreon. That's why if you're able to, you can support us on Patreon and you get a bunch of benefits. Now moving on to this refineries in Krasnodar region. These facilities produce around 6.5 million tons of oil annually, so it's still pretty big. It's not as big as the last one, but they still produce around 1.5% of Russia's annual oil supply. So here's the clip. Here in the next clip, you can see this from the highways, and that's another benefit of attacks like these that are really visible. They give the feeling to the Russian people that a war is going on their border, and even though Putin's media doesn't want to talk about the war, they see attacks like these and they're reminded that the war is not exactly going Russia's way. So let's watch this clip. Now, all the while this is happening, Russia is doing what it does best, and that's spreading propaganda and spreading fear in the Western societies, because Russia knows it cannot win on the battlefield, especially now where Ukraine is producing almost 1 million, I think 2.5 million, something like that, drones. There's no way Russia has the air defenses, Russia has the capacity to stop that. But one thing they can stop is just spread fear, and they can stop the support the Western countries that give to Ukraine if they can spread fear in the Western societies. And the newest way they're doing it, or I guess the trick that's as old as Putin himself, is Tucker Carlson. And what he's claiming is something we have talked about on this channel in, I think what I remember is 2023. I think RT, the Russian media, was spreading this lie that Mexican cartels are showing up with javelins that we sent to Ukraine. There was no proof, and this happened like a few years ago, and now we have Tucker Carlson bringing up the same point right when Russia is getting destroyed inside Russia by Ukrainian drones and Ukrainian agents. Let's watch this clip and then I'll give you a little bit more context.
Second fact, not guess, fact is Ukrainian military is selling a huge percentage, up to half of the arms that we send them. Half. And I'm not guessing about this. I know that for a fact, okay? Not speculation. And they're selling it, and a lot of it's winding up with the drug cartels on our border. So this is a crime, what's happening. Our intel agencies are fully aware of this. You tell me they're not profiting from this. Of course, you think CIA is not profiting from this? Yes, they are. I can't prove that, but I believe that. What, they don't know this? I know this, but they don't know this? They know this. And no one is saying it. Like, no American seems aware of this. We're sending these arms to Ukraine, hundreds of billions of dollars, and it's being stolen and sold to our actual enemies. Like, what the? I'm trying not to swear. What is this?
Yeah, well, the reason why is because you have Zelensky, it was about 3 weeks ago, I think, was specifically asked this question. So he went at some length in one of his interviews to say, oh, no, absolutely not. There's no truth to that at all. We've implemented all this thing. I know that, but the media just reported what he said.
You know, the New York Times could get on the web and order Ukrainian weapons. That's a fact. I'm not guessing. It's a fact. They could do that today.
I guess he thinks if you say fact enough times, you don't have to provide any evidence. People will just believe that it's facts. But let me give you evidence of what I'm claiming. That this was a fake story that was planted by Russia Today, RT, the Russian propaganda news website, back in 2022, in fact. So even I was wrong. It's not 2023. It was in August 2022. And here's United 24 doing a deep dive on exactly how this story was made up. First, there was a fake ad on dark web or darknet, whatever the dark internet where people go to buy illegal stuff. And over there, the ad was that someone's selling Javelin for $30,000 USD. And then Russia Today is saying, oh, it's Ukrainian who are selling it. And then slowly it turned into, oh, Ukrainians are selling half the weapons that they're getting from America and Western countries. Now, this is where I watched Ryan McBeth's video, and he brought up a very good point. Since Russia Today is pushing this narrative for a long time that Ukraine is selling half the weapons that US is sending them, other countries are sending them, what does that tell us about the Russian military and the Russian army, who cannot take over Ukraine when Ukraine is selling half the weapons it's getting, and it's beating a much bigger army with half the weapons from overseas, and it's just showing Russia inside Russia with all the drones and everything? I guess that's just a funny way to think of it, which I didn't think Russian Today people thought about it before they started pushing this fake narrative. But another thing I do want to say, definitely go check out Ryan McBeth's video, because it's way better. He's a military guy, he's a programmer, and he has a way better explanation as to you can track everything we're sending to Ukraine. So no one can just say it's fact that they're selling everything, because you can track it's going to Ukraine and being used there. And definitely go check it out. I'll put it down below. This is where it's good that even though some of our dumb media personalities are falling for Russian propaganda, which is putting it nicely, at worst they're getting paid by Russia and to spread false information. But we do have good people in the government who are calling everything as it is. Here I have a video of Senator Roger Wicker, the senator from Mississippi, and he calls it exactly what it is. Putin is trying to rebuild the Soviet Union, and we need to be careful. We need to stop it before it gets out of hand, before we walk into a World War III. Let's watch the clip.
Vladimir Putin intends to return to as much of the old Soviet Union dictatorship as he possibly can. I hope this war ends. And frankly, I've hoped for 3 years under the Biden administration that administration would provide the freedom fighters inside their own country to have the necessary equipment, the necessary ammunition, the necessary permission to defeat this illegal invasion. But I simply, at this point, want to alert anyone who's listening, alert my colleagues, anyone who is listening to the sound of my voice in any way, to the reality of the utter cruelty, the unspeakable conditions that Russia uses in violation of every international law. If Vladimir Putin comes to the negotiating table and agrees to a ceasefire, we need to bear in mind that he is the gentleman who has countenanced this outrage that I've barely been able to speak about today. And any negotiations we have with the Russians and with the current leadership needs to be done in light of the facts as outlined in this independent report.
Now, the reason Russia is getting so desperate as to bring up something that was debunked years ago, and the reason they're raising 100,000 more soldiers to throw as cannon fodder into this war, is because Ukrainians are actually shocking Russians with the way they are fighting, the way they're improving, and the way the Ukrainian military just keeps getting more and more efficient. In fact, the things have gotten so bad that even Russian media is talking about this. It's talking about how good Ukrainian services, intelligence services, and Ukrainian defenses are. Think about that. In a country like Russia, where all the media is controlled by Putin, by Kremlin, the media itself is talking about how Ukrainians are good. They're surprisingly good. Listen to the clip yourself.
The war has been going on for 3 years, and actually, the Ukrainian intelligence agencies have demonstrated during 3 years a high level of professionalism, cruelty, and persistence. In general, enemies should be treated with respect. All the more so, I note that some of their areas of activities are causing considerable damage to our country.
Now, before I talk about this next part, I want to put a disclaimer that I'm not bringing this up as to say that Ukrainians are not good fighters or anything, but there's the other part to the story where Russians are just not fighting well. They have this bad strategy of not valuing their own soldiers. Just 2 days ago, I remember we showed a clip where how Russians sent a helicopter to rescue one of its pilot whose jet was taken down. The helicopter was attacked attacked by a FPV and then helicopter just took off. It's like, screw the soldiers, the pilot we were trying to protect. We would rather protect the helicopter. We would rather protect the equipment, not the person. That's how much they value their own people. And I'm guessing a helicopter guy, a pilot, jet pilot, is very high up in the hierarchy of people in the Russian army. Infantry, they have no regard for their lives, and they're just throwing them as cannon fodder, as you guys have been hearing all this time. But today, I have some stories from Russia that even shocked me. First one, we have a Russian tank and a tank driver attacking Russian soldiers and just running away. And this is not happening on the front line. That's the crazier part. This is happening on a Russian road, like a few miles away from the front lines. So this isn't like hectic, you're attacking and you accidentally like friendly fire. This is like pure negligence. Watch the clip yourself.
Just now at the checkpoint on the side bridge of Seladovsk, our tank ran over the guys and took off over there. Just now, literally ran over them. Guys, KIA. The tank just ran over them and took off. Effing disaster.
Now, before I show you guys this next clip, I know everyone loves to talk about corruption in Ukraine, and of course, it is a common thing. It was a corrupt country, and it's getting better, but it has ways to go. But the reason we learn about all these corruption stories from Ukraine is because Ukraine is enforcing the law. They're prosecuting corrupt people. They're prosecuting people who are stealing from taxpayers, who are stealing from the aid, and everything like that. Whenever people like Tucker Carlson or anyone who brings up Ukraine corruption as a reason that we shouldn't help Ukraine, they almost forget that Russia is a way more corrupt country than Ukraine. And here's a perfect example of that. Listen to this, because someone was supposed to hire this guy, send him to the front line. They're not doing their job properly.
Dear residents of the Perm region, I present to you a serviceman from the Perm region, conscripted as Skudimkar, who during his service in just a year and a half had 3 so-called injuries. First, he broke his arm while drunk. Second, on the line of combat contact, he looked where he shouldn't have and got a wound in the cheek. And the third time, he was sent to the training ground. There, on a drunken bench, he broke his leg. He received 9 million rubles from the government. He was even recommended for a government award. This wonder man, in quotes, somehow ended up back in the army. Well, in my opinion, the fault lies with the military commissar of the Perm region, some colonel. I'm aware of this. We talked with him about this topic. This person was diagnosed with mental disorders, had been in inpatient psychiatric treatment, yet was still conscripted. And now this serviceman only brings losses to our Russian army. I ask and appeal for this to be distributed throughout the Perm region, to all military commissariats, to show the disgrace of such servicemen.
Now, this next clip is dark, so just a warning for everyone before we move forward. We have Russian soldier admitting that Russians forced themselves, the Russian commanders forced their soldiers to finish off injured soldiers on their own side. So these Russian soldiers are finishing off or eliminating other Russian soldiers. I can't imagine what that does for the morale. I know Japanese had something like this in World War II, but that's a very different culture too. And on top of that, it wasn't helping the Japanese soldiers' morale. When you have to eliminate someone you just spent so long bonding, fighting with together, and now he's injured. And yeah, emotions definitely play a role here, and that's not good for morale when you have to do something like this. Watch the clip yourself. You can see the sadness in his eyes.
Karchuganov Konstantin Valerievich, call sign Korcha. I am serving in 254. Currently wounded, evacuation is not provided at all. They are driving us to the front lines. Commanders Ronin and Sirota force their own men to finish off the wounded. Throw grenades, execute them. I am not refusing to serve. I just want to save my life and return home. Help everyone who can. This is the situation.
Now, because of all this, how the things are going on the front lines and how things are going inside Russia and its economy, we just got the news that Russia didn't just want North Korean soldiers. Things are so bad, they wanted North Korean workers. They wanted people to come help out in the economy. And this is where we go back to something we have mentioned on the channel before. Russia loves bragging about the unemployment rate, and that's 2%, something like that in Russia. Putin mentioned that a bunch of time during his end of the year Q&A when what he did in December, but he doesn't look at it properly properly, or I guess he's just lying to the Russian public. When you look at it from an objective point of view, you have to think about Putin just pulled out 1 million soldiers who are fighting on the front lines, maybe nearly 2 million, because almost 1 million soldiers are wounded, and another million are fighting on the front lines for Russia. Those are the soldiers that are basically taken away from the workforce. And on top of that, when he launched this invasion, hundreds of thousands of Russians just left. And these aren't your average Russians. These are Russians with means, with money, and with intelligence. These are upper level in the economic production. You know, these were the people you wanted in your economy, and they just left because they didn't agree with the war, they didn't want to get drafted, whatever the reason. But since they left, they are out of the workforce, and that's why the Russian unemployment rate is so low. I guess there's two ways to decrease your unemployment rate. Either you provide everyone with jobs, or you just decrease the number of people in your population, and Russia did the latter. But it happened without Putin wanting it, so they're left with a lot of unfilled jobs, a lot of empty jobs that they need workers for, and that's why they're getting North Korean workers. North Korea sent thousands of workers to Russia in 2024. Yonhap reports. According to the South Korea's spy agency, DPRK is sending workers to work on construction sites amid massive shortages of workers in Russia. This is in direct violation of UN Security Council resolution, which forbid North Korea from sending its nationals overseas. The number of North Koreans entering Russia increased 12-fold last year. South Korean intelligence believe the workers are going to Russia on fake study visas. Pyongyang is happy to help prop up the Russian ailing economy and war efforts. We can only guess how much they're getting in return. I'm guessing a couple or tens of thousands, so maybe 10,000, 20,000. That's what 20,000 is what Kim Jong-un is getting for soldiers. Maybe for workers, it's a little less, but still enough for Kim to throw his people away. Now, it's not just the workers' problem that Putin is having. He is also having soldiers' problems. So what he's doing, he's raising another 100,000 people. Now, how is he raising that? We'll get to that in just a second. But first, let me show you this news that none other than President Zelensky broke himself.
Right now we know, our intelligence reports, that the Russians are creating new divisions and developing new military production. Obviously, their cooperation with North Korea will continue to expand. Unfortunately, modern warfare technologies, including drone technologies, are also being spread by Moscow in that region. And this means one simple thing. Putin is not preparing for negotiations or for peace, but for continuing the war. And not only against us, against Ukraine. They are now increasing their army by more than 100,000 soldiers. All partners must be aware of this and must see it clearly. We are ready to share important information, and relevant communication is already taking place through intelligence channels. We must jointly assess the threats and understand what tools we need to counter these actions. Here in Europe, every country will have to strengthen its defense, and the goal of allocating 5% of GDP to defense will not disappear from the agenda.
Now, lastly, I want to show you guys how they are raising these troops. They are just kidnapping their own citizens. Watch this final clip, and you guys have a good day.
Сзади.